real first world problem right there. So let's see. What do we got on today's itinerary? 2 stories, because Netflix Geek Week is going on, because E3 got canceled. So everything that would have gone around E3 is kind of happening now anyway. And, like, part of it definitely comes down to the fact that, like, it's this time of year before we really get into the back half, and it's it's time to look into what's coming starting in the rest of the year. Like, we gotta start the press campaigns for the fall and winter movies and the video games that are coming out this holiday season and all that kind of stuff, which is why, like, you know, CinemaCon and San Diego Comic-Con and all of these other things have kind of this important role in the promotion calendar. And D23 is one of those. Because D23 is later, because then they can also promote what's coming after in early next year, too. So what we have here today is we are going to discuss the Sandman trailer briefly, before also breaking into the statement by the guy who directed Top Gun Maverick. So the Sandman thing, I watched the trailer while I was at work today, and it's a beautiful trailer. I have a feeling it won't quite live up to the comic, or the audio adventure for that matter. I think it could be cool. And a lot of the things that, you know, when you see pictures, it's different from motion. So, like, if I see, and here's the cast, and here's a bunch of pictures of them from, like, their portfolios and things like that, and it's like, okay, cool. Like, I want to see them in costume and stuff before I render judgment. Like, Boyd Holbrook I like as an actor. He's really, you know, great. He's got that new movie coming out with B.J. Novak, and he was great in Logan and Narcos and all these other things. I was like, let's wait to reserve judgment on him as a Corinthian until we see him in costume. And the first pictures came out of him in costume, and it looks pretty cool. Same goes for the guy playing Dream and the guy playing Death, and the woman playing Death. I didn't get their names. I know Olivia Colman, I think is her name. I keep wanting to call her Clara. I did that this morning too, because she was on Doctor Who, and that's her character on Doctor Who. So, I mean, everything looks kind of cool. But the way they're rendering, you know, the realm of the dreaming looks cool and all of that. My only concern is it's an expensive story to tell. It's a very visual effects heavy story to tell. And I'm concerned about how they're going to carry it over into into that while maintaining visual fidelity and not looking weird, while also not quite, you know, demolishing and making it look awful. I think that's a concern I have regarding this. It's part of why Miss Marvel's powers are being changed and, you know, all of that, because they have to keep the budget down. And, yeah, like this was fantastic and all of that, but there needs to be some difference with how the powers are portrayed if it's going to work in the confines of this show on this budget. I feel like that's a problem we could have here as well, in terms of budget making the show look good or bad. I think that's something that is a valid concern in my opinion. That, let's see how it carries over into some of the other things. Like, you know, we don't see renderings of hell in this, you know, thing. So I'm curious about how they do that, how they portray the fight between Lucifer and Morpheus. I want to see how that gets done. But a lot of it is not, like, there's a lot of things that aren't terribly visual effects heavy in reality, like, you know, Morpheus and Dream going around and looking at, you know, Dream doing her job. It's not a visual effects heavy kind of thing. I don't know how far they're going to go with this, or where they're going to end off. But they're doing the Corinthian. They're going pretty far into the dollhouse, even, and all of that. And I think that's a lot that needs to be done. And if that's a big budget, look at where season 2 is going to go. When they go into, with all the gods and everything all vying for hell, that's going to be expensive too. Plus, you also have, the set dressing and all of that for all of these different things. If they're going to go into, the past and do things like that, and they're going to deal with, we have Lady Joanna in the present, which makes sense from a logistical standpoint, purely because then you don't have to have two different actors you're paying. But if we're going to have Lady Joanna in the present and in the past, are we going to go back in time and see, Old England and all these other places? Are we going to, if we're going to go back and do the story of him with the Queen when he's in Africa, that's going to cost money too. It's a very expensive story to tell, and very quickly it could go into the realm of looking shitty if they're committing stuff in certain places and not in the whole thing. But in all, the trailer looks cool, and it comes out August 5th, so we'll see then what they're doing and how it comes out. Hopefully this isn't a bomb like Cowboy Bebop was. So let's move on from there, onto the next story, which will be the statement by, I forget his name, but the director of Top Gun Maverick. He previously directed the movie Tron Legacy, the second Tron movie, which was not a great movie, and it had some questionable effects, and it came out, and it did not do well at the box office. So he comes out and says that the reason why there hasn't been a Tron 3 is that Disney's putting most of its focus behind Star Wars and Marvel. And, to an extent, Disney does put a lot of money there and a lot of resources into distributing those movies and giving them good dates. That's not an untrue statement. However, Disney's also had a lot of very big budget movies that have not done fantastically well. Pete's Dragon, The BFG, A Wrinkle in Time, Nutcracker and the Four Realms. These are all movies that Disney would forget about because they didn't do well at the box office. And they weren't, the big names. And, they had other Pirates of the Caribbean movies and they had other things like that. But it could just be that they didn't make Tron 3 because they didn't like the script. See, it's one of those things, this has Max Landis vibes, this complaint, where it's number one, this guy's on top of the world right now. He made a Top Gun sequel almost 40 years later, and people love the fuck out of it. And you're gonna sit here and grab, I can't make Tron 3. You know what? Maybe it was an answer to a question by a journalist, maybe that was it, but you don't have to go in and start being and be shitty about it. And it's also this idea that, everyone's a genius in their own mind. Everyone thinks that they have the greatest thing on the planet, unless they have imposter syndrome, in which case every meeting you have with an editor, they're like, oh my god, this is where they found out that I'm not really good at this. And which I only bring up because that happened to me today. But I'm looking at this, and it's it could just be the movie's not well. And the reason why I said it gives Max Landis vibes, it reminds me of his tweet when he finished the script for Bright. And he tweeted out and said, I have just written a story that, if executed properly, could be the next Star Wars. And he was talking about Bright, the Will Smith movie that went to Netflix. And the best thing about that tweet is not that he's saying that the movie's going to be the next Star Wars, it's going to be the next big thing, but the fact that he's punting the blame if it's not. It's, I wrote a masterpiece, and if it's not good, it is not my fault. It's well, no. First of all, you claim to be a director. You directed American Ultra and a few other movies. You allege yourself to be a director, and you're not going to direct this movie yourself for whatever fucking reason. Go do it. If you're that concerned with it not coming out, well, go do it. Now, we can't do the same thing with Tron 3, but the problem is Tron 2 was not good. Tron 2 did not make a lot of money, and Tron is an expensive movie to make. And I think that Tron 2 worked when it did because of how different video games had become and how different it was from when the first one came out in the 80s. Like, that's the thing that we need to address here, is the difference. Tron is a product of its time. Tron Legacy is also a product of its time. If they did Tron 3 this close after, it wouldn't have anything meaningful to say. You lose that. Because if you look at, like, the impact and how things are designed and how things look in both movies, just in terms of production design, it's two very different things. Why the fuck is there a race car on the expressway? And the reason for that is they're both designed to look like the movies of its era, or the video games of its era, and to be like, look, this is what we do, this is how things work. And look, I will give you, Tron Legacy has a few really cool visuals in it, and there are some things in that movie that I really liked. And you know, maybe had they not done that scene with CGI young Jeff Bridges, that's not in the grid, maybe it would have been better. But it's my problem with the movie is, like, that happened there, and the story's not great. But the second one is, you know, the first one's a classic. Like, I really liked the first one, didn't really care for the second one, and I feel like that's how a lot of people were. It's like, doing a 3 right after that would not have worked within the confines of what they're trying to do with this story. Like, they could probably do a 3 now, because of how different things have changed between then and now. Because that's what it was about. It's about video games, it's about technology, and technology has changed greatly in the last decade. I would say within the 5 years after Tron came out, I want to say it was 2010 when Tron Legacy came out, but in the 10 years that passed, you know, it's not there. And the other thing is, it's not like Disney's averse to using Tron. Like, there was a Tron TV show on Disney XD. Tron gets featured heavily in Kingdom Hearts. It was in Kingdom Hearts 2. The grid appears in Kingdom Hearts 3Ds, which is, you know, the Tron Legacy version of the same world. And I feel like, was it in Kingdom Hearts 3? No, it wasn't. But either way, it's like, the point stands. Like, it got featured heavily in 2 Kingdom Hearts games, and it also, you know, there's a ride going to Disney now. It's opening next year. It's there's a light cycle ride, and it's not like Tron is this thing that's huge and spanning. It's got enough of a fan base. So I don't think that the idea of, you know, like, Tron be like, it's not like they're against doing Tron because they want to push Marvel and Star Wars. And I think the biggest example of that is, look at the parks. They put a lot of money into putting these light cycle coasters in I think it's only Magic Kingdom, and I think there's also one in one of the parks in Asia. I want to say, I think it's Shanghai Disneyland has a light cycle coaster too, and I think they're also putting one in Anaheim. But at the same time, they're also putting money into Avengers Campus. They're also putting money into Galaxy's Edge. So it's not that they're averse to doing it, it's that your script wasn't good. That's what I would think it is, because they announced they were making a sequel. It's not like they didn't say they were making a sequel, because they announced they were making a sequel, and Jared Leto was going to be in it. Back when, you know, the Jared Leto-assance started, and, you know, before everyone realized, oh, he's just a dick. Like, it's just one of those things where it seems like griping over something that really shouldn't. Like, you're free to gripe. You are more than free to complain about not getting your movie made. Like, by all means, complain about it. But don't do it when you're on top of the world. Like, it just feels like you're being a bitch just because you're upset. Like, oh, well, right now I have a movie that made $175 million at the box office that wasn't Marvel or Star Wars or DC or some other major franchise. It's a fucking Top Gun sequel. who the fuck gave a fuck about Top Gun before this movie came out? That's all I heard from people while I was, at work, while I was, like, anyone I talked to was all like, who the fuck cares about Top Gun? Why are they making Top Gun 2? Apparently a lot of fucking people do, because it made $175 million. And it was a fucking good movie as well. Like, there is, like, definitely a conversation to be had about, why the fuck does this guy have his headlights on behind me? There's definitely a conversation to be had in that regard. But the idea that, that movie isn't being made because of Marvel and Star Wars is just kind of laughable. Like, it just doesn't make sense, because it's like they're not unwilling to put the to do it if the money is there and if it'll have a solid return on investment. Right now, there's no evidence that why the fuck do all these people have their lights on? Right now, there's no evidence that the movie would do well. Because I think what the problem is, like, that's the most important thing about this, conversation that needs to be had, is that there is no, like, they need to come up with a way and look at it and be like, look, so here's what we're trying to do. We want to make a Tron movie. Is there a market for it? Will people go and see it? Because at the end of the day, it's a business. It's not a charity thing. It's a business. Like, the idea, the fact of the matter is they have to make a marketable movie that people will go and see. And if people won't go and see Tron, then they won't make a Tron movie. It's the same reason why you can go and you can pick up a book full of speculative science fiction, short stories, and you can buy it, you can read it, you can be like, wow, this would make a great movie. Why don't they make it? And it's because Hollywood doesn't think it'll sell. Like, go pick up Exhalation by Ted Chiang. Like, there are some great things in there that I'm like, this would be a great Hulu limited series. And they're never going to do it because they just don't want to. And that's really it. It's just narcissism is what it is. It's this belief that I'm great. Everyone here should think I'm great. And if they don't think I'm great, then they're the ones who fucked up. But I'm going to give the same advice that I gave to Zack Snyder on the show. When Zack Snyder was complaining about his Star Wars movie that Disney would never let him make. And I said to him, I didn't say it to him, I said it on the show broadly for anyone who is listening. I said, so make it yourself. Go to Netflix, go to Amazon, go to Warner Brothers, go to any of these places and be like, hey, I want to make this movie. And then bring them the script and be like, we're going to change it so it's not Star Wars, but this is the movie I'm going to make. And then be like, alright, get into a bidding war over it. And you know what? He did that. For my fault with Zack Snyder, he went and did that. He's like, I want to make a Star Wars movie. They won't let me make a Star Wars movie. I'm going to change all the names and change all the locations and change all the terminology and the lore, and I'm going to make a Star Wars movie. I'm just going to go and do it elsewhere. I'll go to, I'll go to Netflix and do it. I think that's where Rebel Moon is coming from. It's coming from Netflix. And it's like, for his faults, he did that. Like, he wanted to make his movie, he did. Like, there's nothing about Tron that is inherently so seeped into the source material that you can't separate it out and do the same story without it being Tron. Like, it's not like I would venture a guess to say it's harder to take Star Wars and pull out the Star Wars and make a standalone movie. That's what I would say. And here we have, okay, well, Tron is basically a guy goes into a virtual video game world. There have been tons of movies where you could do that. Go do that. You're working with Paramount now. Paramount makes Star Trek. Like, they do other movies that aren't just the big names that everyone knows. Like, go in, be like, hey, this was a Tron script. Like, I want to make this movie. It was a script for Tron 3. I modified it so it stands by itself and it's not dependent on the Tron IP. Let's make this movie. And then let people go and see it. Because I feel like Paramount would definitely let you do that, because Paramount does not have a lot of strong IP to play with. They have Star Trek, they have Transformers, they have Sonic. They don't have a ton. Like, it's the same with, like, Universal. I mean, Universal has Jurassic Park, but allegedly this next Jurassic Park movie is the last one. Like, they have that. They have, Star Trek. And that they'll go years on end without talking about making another one, and then all of a sudden they announce another one, and the cast is like, oh shit, we're doing that? Alright. Like, they need more IP. And I feel like this is a great way to get into that market. Get into that game, and get into that, into that world, and start being like, look, here's what we're doing. We're making this movie, and that will be it. It'll be a hard science fiction movie about someone going into a virtual world and doing all of that. And you can make that movie without Tron. So, go and do that movie. And don't just blame the fact that Disney won't let you for why that movie doesn't exist, when you can just go and make that movie yourself. So we'll wrap up there for today. We'll be back with more news as it happens, considering it is Game Fest or something like that, what they're calling it right now. So until then, have a great rest of your week.